Hi everyone, welcome back to our RBT training. Today we're going to be discussing the ABCs of behavior analysis. Okay, just as you have the ABCs of the alphabet, the ABCs are incredibly important to behavioral analysis. And understanding this topic is going to be one of the most important parts of your behavioral training. So let's get started. What's ABC? All right, so ABC can be defined as antecedent, behavior, and consequence. I'm going to let you stop now, make a SAFMED card for it. Great, so your SAFMED card should have on one side A, B, C, and then the definition on the other is acronym for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. All right, add it to your pile for later. All right, so let's write this up on the board. A, B, and C. Pretty easy, right? And as we said, A stands for antecedent, B stands for behavior, and C stands for consequence. All right. Often you're going to see this in a chart-like form, so I'm going to do that for us now. All right. So since we're talking about definitions, let's define exactly what an antecedent is, what a behavior is, and what a consequence is before we go into more depth with this skill area. So, an antecedent is anything that happens immediately before the targeted behavior for interest. Let's write it on a SAFMED card. So on one side, you should have antecedent as your definition, or as your term. And on the other, you can write the definition. Now the definition varies a little bit in your PowerPoint. You can use that one, or you can use the one that I just used. The one in your PowerPoint says a stimulus that exists just prior to a behavior. Remember, a stimulus is anything. So it can be an event, it can be a person, it can be a bumblebee flying by, okay? Anything that happens immediately before a behavior is an antecedent. Other types of antecedents, and this is something good to keep in mind, because it can also include things that happen before the behavior, but not necessarily immediately before, okay? And this specific type of antecedent is called a setting event. You don't have to write a definition card for it. It most likely will not show up on your final exam. However, setting events are things that might influence the behavior. Can you think of anything that might influence your behavior at work that might have happened in the morning before you left the house? Right? I think you can think of a million things. It could be that you got some bad sleep last night. So then when you get to work, your behavior, it might not be the best, right? You might not be 100% able to recall facts and quotes and numbers quickly. You might be less talkative with staff. You might be a little bit more easily agitated with things. So your behavior can be a direct reflection of things that happened further in the day, okay, or before the behavior, not right immediately before. But for the most part, when we talk about antecedents, we are going to talk about things that happen immediately before the behavior. So for example, if a bee flew by and I ran away screaming, and as a consequence I escaped the bee, then we could pretty much say that the antecedent was the bee to me running away and screaming, okay? So that happened immediately before. All right, those are our antecedents. And let's go on to a behavior. We've talked about behavior before, and the fact that a behavior can be defined as any observable and measurable movement or activity a person does. But remember, the key there is that it's observable and measurable when we define it for our purposes in applied behavioral analysis, because we rely on that numeracy in order to collect data and show and demonstrate change, right? It needs to be measurable. It can't be internal thoughts or things that are hard to really accurately and reliably measure. So again, let's make a stack med card for it. Behavior is the term on one side. And then the definition on the other is any observable and measurable movement or activity a person does. Remember, it could be a thing too, right? It could be an animal. All right, so we've got our behavior. I'm sure that you can come up with a million different examples of behavior. But again, remember, it has to be measurable, it has to be observable. And when we define behavior, which we'll get into a little bit later, especially when it comes to making hypothesis and target behaviors that we're looking to really define when we're doing those behavioral assessments, we need to make sure that we're defining it with enough clarity and precision so that no matter who observes the behavior, everyone can measure it the same way. Okay, and that's what we call an operational definition. And if you go back to your 7 dimensions of applied behavioral analysis, can you think of which dimension that applies to? Conceptually systematic, right? Or technological, right? It's written with such clarity and definition that no matter who picks it up, everyone is going to be able to identify and measure that behavior in the same way. All right, great. So we have our behavior, and then let's get into consequence. So a consequence is anything that happens immediately after the behavior.